Now, the only surviving member of the group behind the November 2015 Paris terrorist attacks has been sentenced to life in prison. Salah Abdeslam was found guilty of terrorism and murder charges for his role in the gun and bomb atrocities that killed 130 people, the worst attack in France since World War II. Mark Lebel reports.
Guilty, facing a full life prison term, France's most severe penalty for criminals, the only survivor behind the gun and bomb attacks that killed 130 people in the biggest trial in modern French history, following the country's worst peacetime attack. It shook Paris to its core in November 2015. As well as those killed, hundreds were injured during horrendous attacks on bars, restaurants, the National Football Stadium and the Bataclan music venue. Arrested in Brussels 4 months after the attacks, Salah Abdeslam said he was a soldier of the so-called Islamic State group, but later apologized to victims and claimed he decided not to detonate his suicide vest on the night of the attack. But the court accepted evidence that the suicide vest was in fact defective, and there was no last-minute change of heart. His full life sentence now leaves him only a small chance of parole after 30 years. The court convicted all 20 men put on trial, 19 of them on terrorism charges. The rulings can be appealed.
I'm satisfied with the sentence, and I think that, like many people, it is fair.
I don't actually feel too good tonight. Nothing satisfying about the verdict and nothing satisfying about the fact that it ends, but we still have our injuries and our traumas and our nightmares and our wounds.
As part of this trial for the last 9 months, victims, families of the dead and journalists have been piecing together what happened that deadly night. For France, this has been a chance to come to terms with a national trauma. Mark Lebel, BBC News.
Dr. Sharon Veil is a law professor at the American University of Paris, focusing on terrorism trials, and was at the Bataclan trial yesterday. Dr. Veil, Professor Veil, thank you very much for joining us. How much of the trial were you able to follow, and what did you make of proceedings?
Yeah, hello. So we've been a group of researchers following the trial from its beginning. So we've been, I won't say every day, but almost every day during the last 10 months and observing this trial. And indeed, as you've just said in the report, it was the biggest attack on French soil, and it was a very big organization around this trial. So it lasted for 10 months. We had there testimony of 400 victims. During the first 5 weeks, we had 400 victims giving testimony. In the second part of the trial, we had what we call the context of the geopolitical and sociological explanation. So you had sociologists coming, you had even the former president who came, you had different people coming trying to explain this phenomenon, the phenomenon of radicalization, in order to understand the context of this trial. And then lastly, there were the criminal trial of the accused. So this is how you could divide the 3 phases of the trial, right, which are, of course, interconnected.
So it's easy to see why this took the length of time it did. That is a significant amount of witness statements, testimonies and so forth to hear for the court. The main defendant, there were 14 men, I believe, in court in the end, but the main defendant, Salah Abdeslam, how did he appear? What was his demeanour throughout, and how did he react in the end?
Yeah, so interestingly, as you mentioned, there were 14 accused because 5 of them are presumed dead. So within the highest sentences, we had Abdeslam and the other presumed dead, who all got life imprisonment, which is for life. So Abdeslam, during the 6 year of investigation, because he was in pre-trial detention during 6 years, and it was mainly in Belgium, the investigation in Belgium, he didn't speak during the entire time. He didn't collaborate at all. And then he arrived to court, and for the first time, no one knew if he will speak or not. There were very big expectations from the victims, from the audience, but no one knew if he will actually talk. And in civil law trial, it's not like in common law trial. So it's much direct. There are less procedural rule, and really people just ask questions. So you have the judge ask questions directly, but you have also the lawyers of the victim asking questions, and even the victim can directly ask questions. So it's really a place where there is space to speak. So we didn't know if he will speak or not. And at the beginning, it was a very hard position, saying he's an ISIS fighter and it's a revenge of the killing in Syria by France and etc. So he had this shield. But slowly, you could see how during the testimony of the victims and with the length of the trial, the length is very important. You can see how his narrative slowly being more open, maybe more individualized, more human to understand what happened. But at the end, the court did not accept his version. But nevertheless, it opened up to understand a little bit how this could happen.
Right. Sorry, I just must ask you one brief question. So yes, the court did not accept his version. He had decided not to go ahead with the attack. They said that he simply just didn't have a suicide belt that worked, and that was why he didn't do it. But what do you make of what this has done for French justice, for the victims, for their families, and for France itself, this whole trial? Very briefly, if you will.
Yeah, sorry. Excuse me. About the victims, there are so many victims. So as much as victims, as much opinion you have, and I think it was nice in your report you showed this. So I think you had both. You had the victim that will feel satisfied. You have the victim that will be not satisfied. But in general, I think that there was a very important trial in the sense that we had justice for what happened. Now, if the accused are not happy with this, they could appeal. And for the victim, I think, the trauma will always be there, but at least it was a moment when the society could look at this and deliver justice.
Dr. Sharon Vale, thank you very much for joining us from Paris.